Hello, viewers, and a very warm welcome. You're watching India Fights Back with your host, Kriti Mishra. The government has decided to extend the services of short service commission doctors serving in the military to cater to the rising number of coronavirus cases. The armed forces and allied organizations are playing an important role in the fight against COVID 19. They have set up hospitals, helped up ramp oxygen production, airlifted medical staff and oxygen containers, and are liaising with the state governments to help them deal with the rising number of daily cases. And to discuss the way forward for augmenting human resource to fight the pandemic, I'm joined by very eminent guests on the panel today. Joining me on the program, Professor K. Srinath Reddy, President, Public Health Foundation of India, and Professor Narendra Kumar Arora, Chairman, COVID-19 Working Group of the National Technical Advisory Group on Immunization. Welcome to Rajya Sabha Television, gentlemen.
Thank you.
And Professor Reddy, all medical personnel from armed forces who have retired or taken premature retirement in the last 2 years are being recalled to work in COVID facility within proximity of their present place of residence. Sir, the impact of this decision on the fight against the pandemic.
It's a welcome move to the extent that it brings in expertise of people who have actually been facing a number of emergency situations in the past, who are highly qualified, highly committed, disciplined, and it will certainly augment the capacity in the areas which are offering frontline health services to people with COVID. However, in a sense, it diverts some of the doctors who are already working somewhere else into these areas. It doesn't necessarily increase the total number of doctors available countrywide. After all, they've been working in some other hospitals and now they move to these hospitals. But nevertheless, if there are COVID dedicated facilities, their expertise will certainly be of use.
Professor Arora, what is your take?
I completely endorse. We are kind of relocating and repurposing some of these people. So it's a welcome move, and certainly they bring in a unique experience. In addition to the doctors, I think paramedical personnel in short service commission, they would also be a welcome addition to the pool of health providers. And many of them after retirement may not be actually practicing health. So they will actually expand the pool. So anybody retiring from armed forces and if they are relocated, repurposed in this manner, will certainly help us to manage the challenge more effectively.
Absolutely. It's all about expanding the pool that we have. But Professor Reddy, armed forces are also creating medical facilities in large number, and wherever possible, military medical infrastructure is being made available to the civilians. What has been the impact on the ground so far, sir?
I think it's very helpful. I know, for example, what's happening in Delhi with the DRDO also setting up facilities, the armed forces hospitals across the country opening up their facilities as well. It certainly increases the availability of beds as well as expertise. And certainly the army doctors and nurses have a great deal of commitment and expertise and discipline to offer. And I think in these difficult situations, their stepping in is going to be of great help in augmenting our capacity to provide appropriate and timely health care.
Absolutely. Professor Arora, medical infrastructure of military being available to the civilians. How is it faring on the ground?
Uh, I am aware there's Uttar Pradesh. This has been immediately lapped up. I come from a small town in Uttar Pradesh, Western UP, and we have a big military hospital. And I must say, within few hours, whatever beds were offered, they were taken up, and but it was a big relief. So, as I understand, there are over 150 or 160 hospitals across the country, and they would certainly expand the number of beds available for these very sick individuals. So that is one. The other issue, which, as Dr. Reddy was suggesting, that in different parts they are setting up in emergency these additional beds where, with minimal observation and some oxygen therapy, the patients can be taken care of, and that only army can do that. In matter of days, this additional infrastructure is expanded. So there are two strategies which Army is bringing in, allowing their existing infrastructure and creating overnight additional facilities for the patients. And both are adding up, and these are very welcome steps and timely steps. And I think the Army has come and filled in up the gap quite remarkably, I must say.
Absolutely, sir. We have to agree to that. But talking about another important feature, which is of telemedicine, Professor Reddy has also said that veterans would operate these health services and provide consultation to those patients who remain at home. This will be another important step in easing the burden on our healthcare infrastructure.
Uh, Telemedicine is an absolutely important contribution, particularly in terms of providing adequate home care. With certain degree of expertise being provided to the people who have decided to isolate themselves because they have mild disease and they do not have to rush to hospitals. And having many people have competent and confident home care is going to be very useful in reducing the pressure on the hospitals. Otherwise, what happens is if every anxious person rushes to the hospital and wants admission, and if they do get admitted, they're going to be crowding out patients who really require admission because they have serious disease. But people are naturally anxious when they're not sure about how to take the treatment. They need to be guided, assisted, and provided the confidence. And for that, telemedicine is going to be very important to provide the right kind of medical care as well as infuse confidence into them. That's going to be an important element that we need to look at. And certainly, if we can actually train the people at home who are the care providers, and if they can actually be assisted by primary care healthcare teams who visit them, it will be wonderful. But even in the absence of that, telemedicine can fill a big gap.
Professor Arora, that will also ensure that people will rely on medical advice instead of unsubstantiated messages that they keep getting on their social media platforms or on their WhatsApp.
Kriti, in fact, you're absolutely right. But I must say, last 1 year has been phenomenal as far as telemedicine is concerned. In fact, there is an institutionalization of teleconsultation, and National Medical Authority allows this teleconsultation, and it legalized this that one can write prescriptions, and a lot of people who are in private practice do it for a consideration. So over the time, I think this has expanded because doctors, medical professionals are also worried because they get a huge inoculum when they see corona patients. And that is why breakthrough infections are very high in a lot of medical professionals. So those who are veterans as well as those who would not like to have other risk factors, but their expertise is available. And in fact, we need to document these success stories. I think private hospitals, corporate hospitals have come up with various models. That is not to be just shied away with. And the second is the other telemedicine experiments in the public sector. That also needs to be strengthened, probably little more than private sector. Private sector has really made a lot of strides in this direction. So these are all welcome steps, and it will promote evidence-based medicine rather than as WhatsApp-based medicine. So that is a very useful thing. We must move. And third thing is, I think one of the very important thing which all of us have experienced, that when we are interacting with our patients, even on telephone or WhatsApp or Skype, you are able to identify the earliest signs of moderate or severe illness, and appropriate steps right at that time at home environment can can censor, and you need not go to the hospitalization. So all these are very important steps, and they can be managed. Over last 1 year, we have also learned the disease better. So
Yes.
we know that what are the manifestations. So telemedicine is becoming more comfortable because the doctor initially did not know what is there in next 2 days or 3 days, which now has become a little more predictable. So from all angles, I would say this is something which needs to be actively promoted, And in public sector, I would say we need a little more than what is being done at.
All right, so we need enhanced participation of the private sector as well as the public sector, expanding the capacities there and augmenting human resource, but expanding the scope of the debate. And now let's take a look at some of the other proposals. Professor Reddy, the government could ask final year students of medical and nursing courses to join the COVID force. Certainly, India is the only country in the world that can produce a few lakh young COVID frontline workers or doctors in a few days just by changing the regulations.
Absolutely. I think having final year medical students and nursing students participate in this is very important, both to increase the number of healthcare providers, but also to give them an immersion experience in life, which actually gives them much greater degree of experience and competence than theoretical learning would do or occasional ward rounds would do. So I think you're going to get much better doctors and nurses, both in terms of competence as well as in terms of commitment and compassion. When you're dealing with these kind of challenging situations, you become a much better doctor and a much better human being in that process. So I think getting them into the front lines of this battle is going to be important. One other reason, that is the older doctors who are more aged are fighting it out now. They're getting exhausted and they are much more likely to get sick and ill. And if they do, they will suffer very severe disease. Whereas the younger people are less likely to suffer severe disease even if they contract COVID. So the older doctors can actually stay a little behind and guide the management, whereas the younger people who have got much greater energy but also much better immune reserves and their body's ability to withstand infection is much, much better. If they are in the front lines, we'll actually have a very good team working of both energy and experience.
But Professor Arora, I'd just like to understand, how will the system work? What happens once the pandemic is over? Of course, this is an assumption, but I'd just like to understand.
So I will first take you back to 1975-76, when smallpox eradication was taking place. And our interns, our capacity, MBBS capacity was very limited at that time. I think it was around 20,000 or so, 24,000. But these interns were drafted into the smallpox eradication program. They went into all remote areas for overseeing the smallpox immunization. And they did an outstanding job. And there was no change. You don't have to make too many regulatory changes. As an exception for 1, 2, or 3 years, after the final exam, they have cleared the final exam. You say you go ahead and work, and the degree can be granted to them. So whether it is nursing or medical students, and today the capacity of medical students is touching around 80,000 per annum. So you can see overnight we will be having a kind of MBBS 80,000 MBBS doctors available for working in the field. Similarly, almost double the number of nursing students who have cleared their final exam, but they have not finished their internship, and but they get straight into actual practice, and that is what they are doing anyway. In hospitals, but then we will be making them available in the periphery, in the rural areas, in the outreach hospitals, in the community slum areas where they are more needed. And therefore, we don't have to have too much of a regulatory disturbance or disruption in any way. And these people can be immediately drafted, and our pool really can be expanded by 10 to 15% overnight in a practical.
So, Professor Reddy, that also reminds me that there are several students who have degrees from foreign university but are not recognized in India. Can we also utilize their services? And what are the advantages and disadvantages?
Well, their services can be utilized, but they need very strict supervision because there's been extremely variable quality of training in these foreign medical colleges. I'm aware of this because I had served for 5 years as the president of the National Board of Examinations, which had to conduct the entrance examination for these foreign trained medical students. And unfortunately, despite best attempts, the results could not really cross 20 or 25% at the best of times, and they used to be 10 to 15% at the worst of times. And that is because the training standards in those medical colleges have been extraordinarily variable, and they had all kinds of large numbers in many of these classrooms where the purpose was only to get money out of the Indian students rather than to impart quality education. And also the curriculum was not necessarily matched to Indian medical needs and Indian medical conditions. So there was a lot of disconnect over there, and they needed fresh reorientation and training, which we tried to provide later on, trying to get them back into the Indian track and better kind of training and more appropriate training for the Indian needs. I mean, who would be teaching in Belarus about Kala-Azar, for example, just to give you an example. So we had this challenge there. So I believe they can be brought in because they've had at least partial training, but they need to work in a team under great supervision, and that should not automatically qualify them to an examination, because that can have rather unfair, undesirable consequences later on for patient care post-pandemic if we release rather inadequately trained doctors into the medical profession. I wish they can be trained better, and we should certainly utilize their numbers and talent, but after having them as better finished products.
Professor Arora, you agree with him?
I have nothing much to add, and I will completely endorse. We need to be really careful. They do, and the other thing is they really do not contribute much to the system. The total number annually, or so it may be a couple of or a few thousands. But the important point is that they may bring a bad name to the health system if they are not properly. And that's, I think Professor Reddy is trying to say very close supervision is required. And on that front, I'm afraid I'm not very comfortable. And because of the power and the way over the time exam system has been made pretty simple, very practical oriented. Even then, these people are not able to clear the exam. This just shows the limitation these young people have. And I think even it's a message for the parents who are supporting these kids to go out and have the training, because they're really not fit for our medical.
May I say something in addition?
Yes, please, Professor Reddy, go ahead.
At the last count, when I was there, about 4,000 students used to go abroad for training. That is because we do not have adequate number of medical colleges. Exactly. Particularly in some of the states, our medical colleges were mostly concentrated in the south and western India. So if somebody from Bihar or UP wants to go, it was not always possible. And the number of people who want to get medical education, and these people are not, intellectually anyway inferior, they just needed an opportunity. So we need to increase the number of medical seats. We need to increase the number of medical colleges in terms of proper geographic distribution, give them a fair opportunity to get educated. They will get well trained and serve the country well. On the other hand, we have forced them to go to colleges of questionable quality outside and come back as very incompletely trained or ill-trained doctors. It's not been fair to them either. But to release them as immature and incomplete products into our profession, it is going to be harmful for the patients. So it doesn't serve them well, it doesn't serve the society well.
Absolutely. That's a very important point that you're making, that we have to expand our infrastructure, whether it is about medical colleges or, of course, about hospitals. But another important aspect that I'd like to touch upon, Professor Arora, it is also said, we're learning from the media reports that medical personnel doing COVID duty might be given preference in government recruitment and other financial benefits as well. Do you think that would serve as a big incentive?
I'm not very sure to what extent, because probably irrespective of the financial incentives, most of the medical professionals, personnel, whether they are doctors, paramedical workers, nursing staffs, field community workers, everybody is working, and they are at risk. So the financial incentive is, I would say, some kind of a compensation, because even now, I think the whole the health fraternity is working really. They are trying to breach all kinds of boundaries and trying to work very hard on this because of the pressure itself. So, giving them a little extra money or some incentive would be something which it will make them happy. But I think in terms of work, probably they are doing pretty well even at the moment also.
Okay. Professor Reddy, what are the other bottlenecks, maybe regulatory or otherwise in nature, that we need to remove in order to enhance the pool?
Well, of course, right now we are dealing with an emergency situation. We are trying to bring in all hands on deck. So I think from the point of view of ensuring that people are brought in, but with some level of supervision to work in teams, I think that is entirely appropriate. But whether the examinations can be postponed or completely done away with is a decision for the National Medical Commission to take. But I believe that the kind of practical training they are getting and the commitment they will show in their work, will reflect in terms of their performance in any examination. And secondly, they should be given due credit for their subsequent postgraduate applications for admission to postgraduate courses. So some degree of career incentives and educational incentives should be provided to them. But how that will be handled is for the National Medical Commission to decide.
All right, before we end our conversation, closing comments from both my guests. Professor Arora, way ahead for augmenting the human resource pool that we have.
Uh, I think the whole thought process is a very welcome thought process, because creating infrastructure, buildings, beds is easy, but our corona patients require human beings also to manage them. And trained and skilled manpower is required for that. And therefore, the pool of health personnel needs to be expanded. We need to think of innovative ways without diluting the quality, as well as also seeing that those who are part of this expanded pool uh, get benefit both in terms of clinical experience, both in terms of as better uh, uh, and feel proud about it, and in future career also they benefit out of it. But certainly this is a welcome step, and I think National Medical Authority Commission can take a leadership and think about innovative ways, and this expansion can occur over a matter of, I think, a couple of weeks only. It is not something very difficult.
Professor Reddy, thinking of
Well,
innovative ways without compromising on the quality. That's what Professor Arora says. Your take, sir.
absolutely, but I don't think we should look at this only as a short-term expedient measure. We cannot have an efficient and equitable health system in a public health emergency, providing very swift and strong surge response, unless you have a very efficient and equitable system functioning even in the steady state. So you need to build your reserves. Just to give you some numbers,
Yes.
what the WHO estimated for sustainable development goals to be met and universal health coverage to be delivered, they said when you take doctors, nurses, and midwives, you need 44.5 of them per 10,000 population. We have just about 22, half the number. Secondly, we have 1:1,511 as the doctor to population ratio, whereas we require 1:1,000. We have 1:670 for nurses, whereas we require 1:300. And more importantly, 27% of the doctors who are listed as doctors in the various registries and census are not practicing. They're doing other things. They're not available for active work. So the actual number of doctors really available to the population are very less. So you do need to increase the number of doctors. You need to increase the number of medical colleges, especially in states where there are very few medical colleges. Develop your district hospitals to become centers for training of doctors, nurses, and allied health professionals, and then boost your medical infrastructure alongside. So we have to start investing now, not just fight the current pandemic, but to fight the future pandemics as well as to provide right care even between pandemics.
Absolutely, sir. That's a very important point that you're making. On that note, thank you so much for joining us. So that's all we have for you in this edition of India Fights Back. But before that, let me remind you once again to stay safe from the coronavirus pandemic. Remember to wear a face mask and wash your hands and face regularly and ensure that you maintain physical distancing whenever you're stepping outside. These simple precautions are all it takes to defeat this. Take care and goodbye.
Thank you.